Does your teen love to learn? Does your child love learning for the sake of learning, no matter if we're talking in school or out of school? No, mamas, I gotta tell you, so many teens don't enjoy this thing called learning. Unfortunately, it's a pretty normal thing. Let me know down below when your child stopped enjoying something school related. Let me know when something about learning just didn't seem to be your teen's thing anymore. Because I gotta tell you, I see it all the time as a study skills tutor. I see it all the time that mamas are fighting their middle schoolers over homework, that they're having to really pull their hair out to get their sons, their daughters in high school to study for that test. And I gotta tell you, this love of learning can come and go. It is possible for your child to love to learn again. And we're gonna talk about that. But before we jump in as to why your teens currently don't love to learn, what happened to cause them to lose that enjoyment, that fun when it comes to new things and curiosity and school and learning and everything in between. You know, I'm Jessyka Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring. And if you are all about learning, all about helping your teens love to learn, then be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like this video. So let's back up. All right, let's back up as to why teens don't love to learn. Because before we can fix it, before we can find out, okay, how do we help my teen love to learn again? Well, we've got to figure out what happened in the first place. Why did they go from enjoying it to not? And what are they missing out? What is really possible when your children love to learn? So, number one, when you hear your child say school is boring, or I don't want to learn this particular subject, or why am I doing this? Like, am I ever going to use this? All those kinds of things boil down to a lack of enjoyment, a lack of wanting to learn. All right, so all of that, like literally that word boring, it's kind of sneaky. All right, it can mean a couple different things, mamas. It can mean number one, that thing is boring. Like your teen really feels that way. And it can be just a lack of interest, which comes down to not learning for the sake of learning, which happens when there's not a love of learning. That word boring can also be a cover up. All right, this can literally be maybe your teen doesn't get it, doesn't understand, needs some help, but is not going to tell you that, mamas. All right, I talk about this in my webinars, 3 signs your teen doesn't know how to learn, and boredom is one of those signs. All right, we talk about why do teens say blah, blah, blah class, blah, blah, blah subject, blah, blah, blah assignment is boring. Well, your teen, loves to learn or it doesn't. And one of those reasons can be, does your teen actually get it? Does your teen understand what he's supposed to be doing? 3 different reasons right there for boring is nope, just don't care about this subject, or oh, I'm struggling and you're never going to know, because teens and self-esteem and confidence and all of that comes up as soon as we get into that middle school, high school age, it makes a difference. It's going to change what your teens say. And for those of you mamas, for thinking about your kids being advanced, you're thinking about your child maybe who's 2E is gifted, or is just at this high of a reading level, or is this really really good at math, or just seems to kind of get it a lot sooner, or is farther along than maybe his peers or her peers. That can be another reason that school seems boring, or that thing is boring to learn, is because maybe your teen already has it. Maybe your child learned it, understood it weeks ago, months ago, even years ago, and yet that's what they're still doing in class. Maybe your child is expected to be learning something for the first time that your child doesn't have to learn. He just knows it. And unfortunately, that can also hurt your child's level of learning when they feel like, okay, we're just doing the same stuff and everyone's behind and I got it and I'm bored out of mind because I'm not being challenged. So that is just one concept almost, all right? When we're talking about your kids saying, this is boring, that I don't want to learn this because, no interest. Think about it. Is it because your teen is truly struggling and is missing skills and boring is just a cover up? Is it because your teen just doesn't love to learn? Why are we going to learn anything I don't want to learn? Because that's a different problem than not knowing how to learn. And then we just talked about your teen not being challenged. Okay. Is your teen bored for the sake of, I already know this? Because we could have a whole video about that, mamas. Does knowing something without having to study, without having to really, figure it out, does that constitute learning? And if your kid does that all the time, like just seems to be fine and get those good grades without putting the effort in, well, that's different. And I could argue all day that those teens, those people, those kids don't necessarily have to learn if they just get it because there's not really any learning happening. But I want to stop there for a minute, okay? So now hopefully one reason our teens don't love to learn. Now we're here to talk about in this video what are the awesome things that can happen when your teens love to learn. But there's one other thing we got to talk about, mamas. All right, we've got to talk about study skills. As the CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring, as a study skills expert who teaches teens how to learn so they can love to learn, we have to talk about study skills. So I want you to think about this. What's the last thing that you did? Like last task, last thing you had to learn, last thing that you accomplished, and think about the first time you did it, or maybe how easy it was, or how difficult that thing was. When we do something that we don't know how to do, when we do something that is difficult, or maybe it's uninteresting, do ask yourself, how did it go? Right? Like if you had no instructions, how did it go if it was difficult? How did it go if no one was there helping you, teaching you things? Well, that's what it's like for our teens in school who don't have study skills. All right. We don't enjoy things that we find difficult if we're struggling. All right. Like if there is something missing and there's no one saying, hey, do it this way, or hey, this is what works for you, or you can do it this way, and this is what will happen. Right. Like we need to have skills in order to do those difficult things. So, our teens who don't have study skills, who don't have that level of learning because they're missing study skills, they don't enjoy school. They don't enjoy homework. They don't enjoy doing these learning things because of the fact they don't know how to. All right. So, our teens who don't have study skills, who don't have that level of learning because they're missing study skills, children who love to learn know how to learn through study skills because knowing how to learn, that is a life skill. All right, that's another reason it is so important for teens, for children to know how to learn, is because they're going to hopefully learn something new every day for the rest of their life because there is so much learning involved with life. Backing it up here. Ask yourselves, mama, does your teen know how to learn? If your child doesn't know how to learn, then we definitely have got to talk. We've got to schedule a free consultation. We've got to really figure out what study skills your child is missing. All right, now that we've talked about, okay, why don't our teens love to learn? Now that we've talked about, how does actually knowing how to learn, knowing how these study skills fit in, because there's 12 study skills. So we could talk about all 12 of those, but if that's what you're interested in, what are those essential skills my child needs? What are those skills that I teach in my Love to Learn Study Skills program? Then definitely subscribe, definitely check out other videos here on the channel. But do know my biggest hope for you, my biggest hope really for your teens is that they love to learn. And we want our teens, our children, to love to learn for a couple really basic reasons. So when children love to learn, they enjoy learning for the sake of learning. All right. If out and about, something as simple as you're going for a walk and your child sees a plant he doesn't recognize. A child who loves to learn is going to say, "Hey, mama, what is that? What do you think it is?" Or, that looks like so and so, or such and such. But your teen who doesn't love to learn is not probably going to have any of those thoughts, is definitely not going to say anything. If you say, "What is that?" or "Do you recognize that plant?" your child who doesn't love to learn is going to go, "I don't know, I don't care," and move on. So huge difference right there. Now, mamas, there are so many things you can do to encourage this level of learning. There's so many things you can do to kind of help with that curiosity. And one of those is simply to encourage the question, why? And to also know when your teens ask questions, just like they did as little kids, we want them to keep asking those questions. All right. If we don't encourage that level of learning, we don't really kind of tell our teens it's okay to ask questions, to really, do the research with them, to look into it together, then they start going, "Well, mama doesn't care. And if my adult in my life that, is important to me, that I look up to, doesn't see any value in finding out something new, why should I? What's the point of making that extra effort of doing this thing that isn't something I have to do?" So definitely we want our teens to learn for the sake of learning, because if they can go from a walk and go, "Yeah, I wanted to know what this new plant was, this thing I've never seen before was," and they can then use that experience for future things. Maybe they're sitting down at work one day and there's a new program, there's a new type of project, there's some new hobby at home. They're going to go, "Okay, because I figured out what that flower was, now I can figure out how to do this thing at work." Or these are the steps I took. So maybe some of those will come in handy here as well. But only happens when our children love to learn. And I think it goes without saying that when we're talking about school, when we're talking about learning, your children, your teens who love to learn, their grades are going to be better. Like, short and simple. There's a huge connection between success in school and a love of learning. Because how can your teens do really well in school unless they are enjoying school, unless they feel like they know how to learn and consequently love to learn? Now, there are plenty of kids out there, plenty of teens who enjoy school but don't have the grades to show for it. But the question is, what's more important there? The grades or the level of learning? And we're gonna have a long discussion about that. So let's keep those comments positive. But do you know that I see it all of the time? That it's so much easier to enjoy something that you're good at, that you feel like you know how to do. And that's when those study skills come back into play. That's when, okay, we want our teens to love to learn. We want them to enjoy learning for the sake of learning. But yet, how do we give them the tools, the skills to do that? It comes back to study skills. So, mamas, thank you so much for watching in. Have an awesome day. Remember, we have just scratched the surface. So if you want your teens to love to learn, then do know they got to have study skills. And the way I do that is through I Love to Learn Study Skills program. So definitely schedule a free consultation. The link is down below.